Hello and welcome to the second part of this tutorial where we're going to take this man that we've added inverse kinematics to the legs and to the arms with the Duet plugin. So if you haven't done that, you'll need to see the previous tutorials to be able to install and use this script to get basic IK sorted out for the legs and the arms. And in this tutorial what we're doing is we're taking this IK man and we're going to animate him with a walk cycle that's supposed to be as close to in time to music as we possibly can get it. Now, we recognise that there's a problem. The problem is simply this, that the samples per second for video, I'm working with PAL, so it's 25 samples or 25 frames a second, NTSC would be 30 frames a second, is really very difficult to match with audio where CD quality is 44,100 cycles or samples a second. So it's very hard to match those up perfectly. But what we've tried to do is to bring in a piece of music and create a loop so that we can get a good walk cycle that's as close to in time to the music as we can get. Then we're going to animate it to the music, and we're just going to do one walk cycle, and we're going to use an expression to duplicate that walk cycle or make that walk cycle continue down the line. But we recognise there's bound to be things like drift in due course. So this is a very rough example. What we did was we went and found some music. Now I'm using premiumbeat.com. They've given me permission to be able to use some of their examples so that you can actually hear it in this tutorial. You wouldn't use these examples for a proper production, but what you do is you download an example. Now I'm using Morning Wanderer, so if I just play this through, you can hear that this is actually also what we call watermarked music, that after a few seconds it plays back, it says premiumbeat.com. You'll hear that in a minute. Okay, so it is watermarked, and what you do is you would download the preview MP3, which is also watermarked, and you put that in your project to do all your setup, but you wouldn't actually buy the final version until the client turns around and says, yes, I'm happy with that, use that. And at that point you'd buy the final version and you replace the MP3 with the final version ready for broadcast, because obviously you can't broadcast with MP3s and examples and watermark music without permission, which I've obviously got from Premium Beat, so thank you Premium Beat for that. Now what I then did was I brought that in and tried to get a loop, and we showed that you can try and get a loop in After Effects, but there's always a slight pause before it goes back to the beginning. So I suggested that we took the MP3 into Audition, which I've done here, and then we actually created a loop in Audition which plays back a lot more smoothly than with After Effects. Okay, so that's an example. It's not perfect, but it'll do. And then we save that loop reference, again with a low quality MP3. You don't need high quality because you're never going to use it. It's just a reference. And we brought that into After Effects and we dropped it below our audio, and then we did as close as we could to sync the two up so that we can get our work area bar directly over what would be a loop. And then I've turned off the reference here. In fact, we don't even need it in our project anymore now that we've used it. So I can select that and hit delete. And now hit the 0 key on my numpad to do a RAM preview. As you can hear, with After Effects there's a slight pause before it goes back to the beginning, which is another reason why we used Audition. Okay, so now we've done that, we're ready to actually do the walk cycle. And the controllers that we're going to use are going to be the Pelvis Controller for making the body go up and down, the hands and the feet. And what I've done is I've set the man up, the example man up, in the middle of the screen because we're going to make him walk on the spot. Now there's a reason why you might want him to walk on a spot. The reason that you want him to walk on a spot is that we're going to take the final sample and we're going to put it into another composition where we can have him moving across the screen. So rather than moving across the screen as we do the walk cycle, which is more complicated, we just have him walking on the spot, and then we take the final walking example and move that through another composition, or do a final animation with the master controller at the end to give the example of moving. So you don't move him as he walks through, you just have the feet walking on the spot. The other thing you could do is you could bring in another large image underneath and have the image moving, and then it looks like he's walking through as the image behind him moves. So walking on the spot is the way to actually do this. Now I've also got a guide layer in here which is going to be my floor, but I don't want to be able to select that guide layer. So what I can go is go to View, and I can go to Lock Guides. And when I click lock guides, I can no longer select that guide layer, which could have been a pain. So I can no longer select that guide, so that's no longer a problem. It's going to stay where it is without causing me any issues. If I want to turn it off, I can still go down to guides and turn it off. But for this example, having a floor that he can walk on is great. And I've started off by setting him in a pose where his pelvis is slightly lower, his knees are slightly bent, he's hit the ground. So this is the starting point or the end point of the walk cycle, because we're going to do a continuous walk cycle. So his hands are back and forwards, and his feet are at the place where he's going to start off his next step. So that's the place that I want to begin. And I'm just going to be working with these 5 controllers here. I'm not even going to work with the master one, in fact. So I've even shied the master one because I don't really want to work with that one as well. So now that we're ready to do that, we need to work out what we're going to animate. We're going to animate the pelvis, and we're going to animate both feet and both hands, so we can select all of those layers. We could also animate the rotation of the head and neck. I'm not going to bother, but you might also have the head bobbing, so we could do the head and neck as well, but I'll let you do that in your own projects. And with these ones I'm going to hit R, then Shift P, because we're going to look at position and rotation. Click the stopwatch for position and rotation, set up for the beginning, which is what I've done here. Okay, so I've set it up and I've now set my keyframes at the beginning of my work area bar. Now, to be a perfect loop, a perfect walk cycle, you also need to go to the end of your work area bar and then also duplicate the keyframes. Now, you can't do that and sort of duplicate them because that will end up duplicating the layer. But what you can do is select keyframes for individual layers and copy and paste, which is Control Command C, Control Command V, and it pastes it where your current time indicator is. So if I take those ones there, Control CV, and again these ones here, CV, these ones here, CV, and these ones here, CV. Okay, so that's the beginning and end point. However, halfway through, now I'm at 124, so halfway through it'll be 24. Everything's got to be exactly the opposite, plus we'll also want the pelvis down, because if you think about a step, foot hits the ground, the pelvis is low, but middle, the pelvis leads and goes up. So the in-between bits, the pelvis is going to be up, but these steps, whenever his foot touches the ground, the pelvis needs to be low. So if we go to 24 frames, which is just there, we can also say that the pelvis should be in the same place. So we can actually just copy and paste the pelvis at that point, but we need to swap over the feet. So what we can do is we can go to left foot and take the 2 keyframes for that, copy, and then we can go to the right foot, make sure that layer's selected, and paste. And now that foot's switched over. Now we can take the right foot, take the beginning keyframes for that, copy, and then take the left foot and paste. Now this is a very quick walk cycle. It's going to be very average without any additional customization. Obviously you might want to add slightly more variation, slightly more customization to give him a limp or whatever you want. This is just showing you the quick way of doing a basic straight walk cycle. And again with the hands, so if I take the left hand and I select those 2 and copy, and then take the right hand layer, select that, paste, and then the right hand keyframes, select those, copy, take the left hand and paste. So we've got a basic move through, and if I hit the RAM preview, okay, so you can see that we've got the basics blocked out. We've actually got an animation, but clearly it's not right, because in the middle, we're at this point here, if we go to 12 frames say, then we've got an issue. The foot that's coming backwards, which is the green foot, which is our right foot, should be hitting the ground at 12 frames. And the legs should be straight, the hips should be raised. Okay, so let's firstly play with the position and rotation for this particular item here for the right foot. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the V and the W keyboard shortcuts. The V keyboard shortcut for selecting the actual item, moving up and down. W for rotating it, as we say, rotation, W. I want a firm footstep, so I want the item actually flat and I want it on the floor. Okay, so about there. but I'm going to move his pelvis up as well. So I'm going to take the pelvis at this point and I'm going to move it up so that the leg is pretty much straight, and then I need to actually just move the that leg's not quite touching the floor. Just get that leg touching the floor. I'll zoom in a bit. So go back to the pelvis, just move the pelvis down, it's a tiny bit high. There we go, we've got a good contact and the leg's straight. Plus we might also want to rotate the pelvis back a bit, so I'm hitting W just to bring the body back a little bit at that point. Okay, so that leg is now making a firm touch, the pelvis has moved up, but we've now got to look at the other foot, which is the left foot, and we need to move that up. So again I'm hitting V to just select it and pull it up as it steps backwards, and W to rotate it if I feel I need to, but I think that's probably about right. Okay, so the hands, I think we can probably leave those as they are, but you'll see that as he steps and steps up, the next foot comes and he steps down, and so what we pretty much need to do is just repeat the process again at 1 second 12, and what we can do is we can take the pelvis position here, take those two, and copy and paste them to the same layer, so his pelvis is going to be up, and then we need to swap the feet over. So again, the left foot here, select that, copy, and go to the right foot layer and paste, and the right foot layer, select those two, copy, and go to the left foot layer and paste. And now when you actually do a RAM preview of that, okay, so you've got a basic walk cycle that looks like you've actually got real weight in there. So it looks like when he's walking he's actually pushing up and down with his foot, and then you do more animation with the head or the neck, and add other bits and pieces in there as you want to go through. The other thing you might want to do is actually sort of select your keyframes, select them all, and hit F9. However, I can't hit F9 because if I hit F9 I'll stop my recording. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on one of the keyframes with them all selected, go to Keyframe Assistant and choose Easy Ease. And now we should have a much smoother animation. So if I just do a RAM preview of that, you can see how smooth that now looks. Now obviously that's looping and it's sort of stopping at the beginning, but you can see that the end result looks much better. So the final thing we need to do is make sure that this goes all the way down the timeline. So if I double click my work area bar here, you can see that takes me up to my full 10 seconds. Your composition might obviously be a lot longer than this. And what we want to do now is we want to add the expression that's going to loop out these keyframes all the way down the timeline so I don't have to duplicate them. And if I make any changes later on, it'll just take into account the changes without me having to delete keyframes and start again. So we're going to add the loop out expression, and we're going to add it to all of these. So I'm going to alt click on the first one, and in fact you can see all of them have come up because they were all selected, which saves me a bit of time. So I just go in there and type it. So L-O-O-P, lowercase l, capital O, lowercase up, open brackets, and then speech marks or shift 2, cycle, C-Y-C-L-E, speech marks, close brackets. And then we can select that and do a Control C to copy, and then just go through all the other ones. Just select once and it's selected, and then just V, Control V, click, Control V, or Command V, click, Command V. It's as simple as that, Command V. Command V, because we'd already selected them. This is probably the quickest way. You can copy and paste expressions, but I can't see there's a much quicker way than actually doing this. And without any error messages, it means we've typed it properly. So it's loop out with a capital O for out, open brackets, speech marks or shift 2, cycle, shift 2 again, speech marks again, close brackets. Now what we've said is loop these keyframes out all the way down the timeline. So if I hit home and go to the beginning and do a RAM preview, you'll see that it will play all the way through my 10 seconds. And let's see how close it is to staying on the beat as he walks through. I think that stays pretty close all the way through. One final addition to this walk cycle that I just wanted to point out and show you how to fix is that when we've done that quick animation, you'll notice if I drag through and I've added a floor in, if you look at his feet are kind of bouncing and going through the floor, and it's not looking quite right. And I just want to show you how to fix that, what we've actually done. Firstly, just to show you, here's the pelvis. I've actually made sure that all the keyframes for position, the X position is unchanged. In other words, he's not going backwards and forwards. I've not got the pelvis moving backwards and forwards. You can have the pelvis moving backwards and forwards for a walk cycle. So you could have it starting back and then moving forwards and then going on. But at the moment, for this particular walk cycle, I've made sure that the X position, the side-to-side position for all these keyframes, is exactly the same. So I've gone through and made sure it's 22.5 all the way through. But the problem we've now got is with these feet going through. So if we look at the first one, you can see the green foot's going backwards. So the green foot is the right foot. And as we go forwards, if we look at the position and rotation for this particular layer here, and we go through, you'll see that the position and rotation between the first and the second one, now particularly looking at position Y, the up and down value, it starts at one value and then changes to another value when it gets to the next keyframe. And really what we want to do is make sure that that up and down value is the same, and also that the rotation value is the same between these first two keyframes. So if we look at the values, so we'll see it's minus 64.9. So if I go to the next keyframe and just make sure that this value here is exactly the same, so minus 64.9, and also the rotation value, so I'll just go between the two, it was 11.3, just make sure that that is also 11.3. So just click in there, 11.3. So when we pull forward now and look at that foot, you'll see that that foot is staying on the ground as it goes through. So let's actually do the same with the left foot now, which is going to start here at this keyframe. So if we look at that value for the up and down value, the second value, so it's minus 64.9, go ahead to the next keyframe and also make sure that is also minus 64.9. And let's look at the rotation values. They should be the same, should be 11.3, so we want this next one at 11.3 as well. So I'm just going to select that keyframe and just make sure that that's 11.3. And just making those small changes will get rid of that bounce problem. As you can see, as it pulls through, there's just a very slight bounce problem at that point there. So let's just have a look. It's the right foot again. So we're at minus 64.9. What's the previous one at? Previous one is also at minus 64.9. That's correct. We're at minus 11.3 for that one and 11.3 for that one. So if there's a little bounce going on there, what we've actually got is either the hip is going too high and extending the whole thing too far, which is a possibility, or it's to do a little bit with the easing. So let's just have a very brief look at the hip. So here's the pelvis. So the first keyframe goes from minus 412.9 through to minus 449. So let's just pull it down and see if that solves the problem. So we're hitting at that point. Let's just see if that solved the problem. That's actually solved the problem. So we're going to have the same problem with the next one. So let's just see what value we've given it. That's minus 444.2. So I suspect we're going to have the same problem just here. So if we make sure that that's also at minus 444.2. And let's just pull through. So the green foot staying on the ground nicely, going through, and then the blue foot staying on the ground nicely and going through. In fact, it's a little bit low, the blue foot. Or you can go in there and actually make the changes. So the left foot is the blue foot. So at this point it's just about on the ground. So let's look at the X value here. It's minus 64.9. And let's just go through to the next one. Just check it is the same. Is it minus, wait, it's minus 64.1, so it needs to be minus 64.9, and that's probably going to solve the problem for us. Yeah, that's going to slide along nicely. And just check that the rotation values also haven't changed, so plus 11.3, plus 11.3. Yeah, so we're actually going to get rid of that bouncing issue. You do sometimes need to go in and just make sure that your keyframes are sorted out. If I play through now, overall that's a pretty good walk cycle, and that's how you can deal with these issues that we've got of bouncing that might come through. What I'll do is I'll upload this final version and you can then go and look for the music yourself and have a play. My name's Andrew Davis, thanks for watching.